I would like to thank Blue Waters organizers for inviting me to give a talk at my first Blue Waters symposium, and which will be the last as well. And also I would like to thank two of my undergrad students, Elena Edwards, who is a math major, physics and computer science major, and as well as John McGargle, who is sitting with us today. This is a research that is a joint work with them, and they were also 2018-2019 Blue Waters interns. So I use Blue Waters to motivate and train University of Arkansas undergrad students in the use of large-scale computation and data analytics. And we also use Blue Waters to optimize and scale computationally very expensive front tracking application code to large-scale turbulent mixing simulation. The goal of this project is to engage our undergrad students into petascale computing and introduce my research interest. So the problem that we have been working on is Rayleigh-Taylor instability. It's an hydrodynamic interface instability which occurs in an idealized problem of important scientific and engineering problems. If you have two fluids like heavy and gas, the interface between these two fluids becomes unstable under any disturbance. So this is a very important instability because it's crucial in all forms of fusion, whether the confinement is magnetic, inertial, or gravitational. Especially the applications are inertial confinement fusion and as well as supernova explosions. So the quantity of interest is to predict the growth rate alpha, which describes the outer edge of the mixing zone. So we do have this heavy and light fluid. So the penetration distance of the light fluid into the heavy fluid is called bubble height. So the bubble height, and as well as A is the Atwood number, G is the acceleration, and time is the time in our simulations. So the question is, what is this growth rate in different experiments and as well as the simulations? So what are the key challenges? The key challenges are quantifying errors and uncertainties in multiphysics models and as well as data, they are extremely crucial to achieve good results and for the validation and verification purposes. And so what are the dependencies of this alpha bubble and on the experimental parameters, such as the width of inertial mass diffusion layer, the initial perturbation, short, long wavelength, fluid viscosities. And there are several models to actually model the turbulence. One of them is Reynolds average Navier-Stokes equation, which resolve length scales sufficient to specify the problem geometry. And Large Eddy Simulations resolve these scales and as well as the subscales of the generic turbulent flow. When it comes to the third modeling, which is the direct numerical simulation, it resolves all relevant length scales. So when we look at these three different numerical models, the least demanding in terms of resources is the Reynolds average Navier-Stokes, whereas direct numerical simulations are the most demanding in terms of resources. DNS is the most accurate within all these three models, but it has some limitations, such as the moderate Reynolds numbers or simplified geometries. So we use in our model Large Eddy Simulation, and we also show that the sensitivity of modeling issues. So the essential features of our algorithmic strategies based on Large Eddy Simulations, which are filtered continuity, momentum, energy, and concentration equations for compressible flow, which is actually coupled with subgrid scale models to actually capture the small scales in our simulations. And the third one is the front tracking. Front tracking is used to control the numerical mass diffusion to achieve good resolution of sharp interfaces and steep gradients. So If I'm in math conferences, I normally show subgrid scale models, but I'm not going to show, so it's extremely complicated, but the idea behind is extremely simple. So the equations that I'm talking are nonlinear, so the averaging produces an error. The average of the product and the product of the average has a difference. This difference is approximated by proportional to gradient, and the key idea is to find the constant which is coming from the SGS coefficients, and we obtain this from the simulations. All these features that I presented are implemented in our multi-phase simulation code called Frontier. So these are the multi-species Navier-Stokes equations, as I told already. So the blue terms that you are seeing on the right-hand side are the subgrid scale model terms. And we believe that, and we will show in the next slides, that large eddy simulation with subgrid scale models gives a very good agreement in our simulations when we compare it with the experiments. So these are the key challenges, and when we look at the validation, when we compare our simulations with the experiment, we look at several experiments from Smith and Young's, which is actually the fluid within the rocket tank. And we also look at air, helium, hot, cold, salt, fresh experiments, and those are their growth rate alpha, experimental bubble height, growth rate are given. So we compare our alpha simulation with their experimental simulation, and most of them has zero discrepancy. And we also, to answer questions, what are the important parameters in our simulation, we actually did some uncertainty quantification studies as well using the Sunday National Laboratory UQTK toolkit. And in this case, when we did this sensitivity analysis, the question is, what are the key parameters? Initial mass diffusion coefficient, long wavelength initial perturbations, and so on. So on the left-hand side, the green, you see the late time fluid mixing. And on the right-hand side, we have the black dots, which are the experimental data points coming from Smith and Young's 87 report. And we actually achieve a good result with certain parameters where the initial mass diffusion is 0.35 and the long wavelength is most unstable wavelength is 0.21. And we perform simulations. You start with coarse grid, you go to medium grid, define, and you have to answer where to stop. And so what we do is we also study the Mesh Convergence. So what you see is these three plots, which are colorful in here, are the heavy fluid concentration at the midplane. So this is the coarsest grid, medium, and the fine grid. As you can see, there is a big discrepancy between the coarse and the medium grid. So what did we do? We look at the probability distribution functions, and we look at the spatial array L1 norms of these cumulative distribution functions, mesh differences. So these yellow boxes, which are the supercells, shows that there is a big difference between going from coarse to medium, which we can also see it by eye. So this is a big error at the middle of our region. Whereas when we go from medium to fine, this is the 8x2 supercell, we achieve way better results, and we see that the error reduces a lot. So the question is where to go and how to, what should be the mesh. So with large eddy simulation, if you have a moderate mesh and as well as the subgrid scale, you can actually get good resolutions. So the application code that I have been using is called Frontier. It's a mature production quality multi-physics simulation. It has compressible, incompressible, MHD capability, and under continuous development to keep track with the high-performance computing as well. So when we started this project, this code was purely MPI parallelized, and to pass states and interface data from one processor to another. So in the past, when we had the Insight 2011 and 2012 awards, we actually scaled this code to entire Argonne leadership facility, and we get 62% efficiency. So within this project, what we did is to actually engage our students to this HPC programming environment, and they did different programming environments. They used profilers, and they tuned the code, and we actually developed a hybrid code with MPI plus OpenMP parallelization. And we used the CPMAT and TAU. And when we did that, we observed that 77% of the computation the time is spent to 77% is going to computation. And it gives all the capabilities so that it helps our students. The call graph helps us, the students, how these function calls are being called, who's calling what. And also TAU profiling help us a lot. It tells us, okay, we know get flux function is the expand, like 27% of the time is spent in the flux computation. So our focus is to actually extend that part to OpenMP parallelization. So we implemented the OpenMP library into the weighted essential non-oscillatory scheme, and we investigate different OpenMP scheduling, and we actually achieve some performance. So the efficiency go from 60% to 70%. And this is the one thread and versus four thread, which were obtained by John's simulations. So Blue Water team's contribution is, it's not only helped me to run many computationally intensive simulations, but it's really supported me in guiding and teaching two University of Arkansas undergrad students. They participate in 2-week intensive petascale conference at the beginning of our project, and it was a great help. And also they received travel awards to attend the Supercomputing 18, and after they came back, they were extremely motivated. And now, they have shared their data by giving posters in here, and as well as in Arkansas Academy of Science, and John received the first place undergrad poster. So, and Elena is now at Oak Ridge National Lab doing her internship. John is doing her internship at Texas HP. And so these are my collaborations from Stony Brook University and as well as Los Alamos National Lab. And these are the references to the results that I presented in my talk today. So I would like to thank to the Blue Waters project team and as well as Schroeder Foundation. So thank you.